Imagine surviving one of the bloodiest battles in Roman history, only to disappear forever. Not one soldier, not a handful of survivors, an entire legion. Thousands of trained Roman soldiers marched into battle, were taken alive, and then vanished so completely that historians are still arguing over what happened to them more than 2,000 years later. Some believe they died in captivity. Others think they spent the rest of their lives guarding a distant frontier. But one theory claims they traveled farther than any Roman army ever had, all the way to ancient China. It sounds impossible, but the truth behind Rome's lost legion may be even stranger than the legend. The year was 53 BC, and the Roman Republic stood at the height of its power. Its legions had crushed rival kingdoms across Europe, North Africa, and the Mediterranean. Roman roads stretched for thousands of miles, trade poured into its cities, and its influence reached farther than ever before. To many Romans, it seemed as though their empire was destined to rule forever. But for one man, Rome's greatest victories still weren't enough. His name was Marcus Licinius Crassus. Already one of the richest men in Roman history, Crassus possessed unimaginable wealth. Yet fortune alone couldn't secure the one thing he desired most: immortal glory. Julius Caesar was conquering Gaul. Pompey had become a celebrated military hero. Crassus wanted a triumph worthy of standing beside them. His opportunity lay to the east. Beyond Rome's frontier stood the Parthian Empire, a wealthy and powerful kingdom controlling the trade routes between the Mediterranean and Asia. Crassus believed defeating Parthia would cement his place among history's greatest commanders. Instead, he was marching directly toward disaster. Near the ancient city of Carrhae, the Roman army prepared for battle. Everything about the coming fight looked familiar. The legionaries assembled into disciplined formations, locking their famous shields together and waiting for the enemy to attack. But the Parthians had no intention of fighting Rome on its own terms. Their army relied on speed instead of discipline. Wave after wave of expert horse archers raced across the desert, staying just beyond the Romans' reach while unleashing a relentless storm of arrows. The Romans waited for the barrage to end. It never did. Behind the Parthian lines, camel caravans continuously delivered fresh arrows, allowing the attack to continue hour after hour without slowing. Every attempt by the Romans to charge was met with retreating horse archers, only for heavily armored Parthian cataphracts to crash into the exhausted legionaries before disappearing once again into the open desert. The disciplined formations that had conquered much of the known world slowly began to collapse. By sunset, the battlefield had become a catastrophe. Nearly 20,000 Roman soldiers lay dead. Another 10,000 had been captured alive. Marcus Licinius Crassus himself was killed during failed negotiations. For Rome, Carrhae became one of the greatest military disasters in its history. But the battle wasn't the greatest mystery. What happened afterward was, unlike many defeated armies of the ancient world, the surviving Roman prisoners were not immediately executed. Instead, they were marched east into the vast territories controlled by the Parthian Empire. Day after day, week after week, the exhausted legionaries disappeared farther beyond Rome's borders. Then, the historical record almost completely falls silent. No triumphant return. No record of a mass execution. No successful escape. 10,000 professional Roman soldiers simply vanish from history. For centuries, no one knew what became of them. Had they died in captivity? Were they scattered among distant settlements? Or had they reached somewhere no Roman writer ever imagined? The mystery lingered for more than 80 years. Then another empire may have recorded a clue. In 36 BC, during a military campaign in Central Asia, soldiers of China's Han Dynasty reportedly encountered an unfamiliar defensive formation. One ancient Chinese account described enemy warriors fighting in what has been translated as a fish-scale formation, a tightly packed defensive arrangement that reminded some historians of Roman legion tactics. For nearly 2,000 years, the passage attracted little attention. Then, in the 1940s, American historian Homer H. Dubs proposed a remarkable theory. What if those mysterious soldiers were descendants of the Roman prisoners captured at Carrhae? He suggested the Parthians may have relocated their Roman captives to distant eastern frontiers, where they eventually became involved in conflicts along the Silk Road before encountering the expanding Han Empire. It was an extraordinary idea. For a moment, it seemed as though history's greatest missing army had finally been found. The theory spread quickly around the world. Researchers focused on the village of Liqian in western China, where local legend and the appearance of some residents fueled speculation that Roman descendants still lived there. Headlines declared that Rome's lost legion had finally been discovered. But history is rarely that simple. As historians examined the evidence more carefully, the certainty began to disappear. The Chinese records never identify the mysterious soldiers as Romans. The so-called fish-scale formation could have been used by several different armies. Modern genetic studies have also found no convincing evidence linking the people of Liqian directly to Roman legionaries. That doesn't mean the theory is impossible. It simply means the evidence isn't strong enough to prove it. So what really happened to Rome's lost legion? The honest answer is the same one historians have given for generations. We don't know. We know they survived the battle. We know they were taken prisoner. And we know they disappeared into the eastern reaches of the Parthian Empire. Everything after that remains hidden behind centuries of silence. Perhaps they spent the rest of their lives guarding forgotten frontier settlements. Perhaps they were absorbed into distant cultures until every trace of Rome faded away. Or perhaps, somewhere beneath the deserts of Central Asia, a rusted Roman helmet still lies buried beneath the sand, waiting for archaeology to uncover the final chapter of their story. More than 2,000 years later, the fate of 10,000 Roman legionaries remains one of history's greatest unsolved mysteries. Sometimes the most fascinating stories aren't the ones history explains. They're the ones that history never finished telling.